Okay, we're almost ready. We've got several platforms coming together, and poor Ryan is trying to get my account set up to go to more than one program, one platform.
I usually stand up and tap dance about this part, but I think I'd be out of frame.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Thank you, Ryan. Here we go.
Okay.
Hey, welcome back to Hyperbaric Plus, and this is our weekly podcast with my great friend Keith Bishop with PrevaiLoverCancer.com. And man, we had a really good time in the chamber just now, and I wish you hadn't set those where I can still reach them. Keith made some peanut seed, not peanut, but seed and nut
and egg and cacao, coconut oil, protein bar.
He was telling us how this great protein bar his wife makes last week in the chamber, and I said, okay, dude, you got to bring some. Man, are they awesome. So anyway, I'm going to have to slide those away. I've had two. So Keith, we're going to talk this week about rethinking cardiovascular and kidney disease.
Yes.
I saw a video and you were asking about a topic and I shot it over to you. And there was just a lot of great information that I wanted you to I don't believe everything that I see on a YouTube video.
Right.
So I love sending them to you and you can pick it apart. And let's take the best parts out of that video. So with all that said, disclaimer.
Disclaimers, yes. So the information we're providing is for educational purposes only. If you have any questions about anything, you do need to check with your healthcare provider for tests and things like that. So this is education. We're not diagnosing. We're not telling you should do this. And matter of fact, this is controversial information because it's going against what we've been told
for many years.
And so, back in the 70s is when things really started to change, and they were trying to come up with ways to treat heart attacks and strokes, or prevent them, and treat them really, and to prevent them. Medications, the statin drugs started coming out, and we've been told for many years that those are the cure for to prevent heart attacks and strokes.
Well, your doctor absolutely will not get off of the script. This is what they do, and they can't move from that because it's standard of care.
It's standard of care. So doctors are still ingrained in that, and they're still doing that. So the information I'm providing is education purposes. So, and my intent in this is actually to help us to think outside the box.
And have questions to ask your doctor.
Exactly. So,
and the other deal is we do Q&A. So
yes, Q&A. Yes. So if you got questions, primarily we're concentrating on vascular disease that affects everything in our body. And even my specialty is cancer now, but people with cancer have vascular disease. And I see
your body's not operating efficiently.
Exactly. And so, matter of fact, poor circulation is a risk factor for cancer. So we have to open up those blood vessels. A common question, one of the most common questions I've probably had, over the past 30 years doing this is, should I take a statin drug or not? Okay. And it's common, literally, there's been times I would be asked that every single day, for over 30 years. And so it's hard to know for sure, how to answer that because everybody's different and unique. But one of the first things that I look at, and I've always looked at, is, if a person has high blood pressure, why is that? Okay. And so that person might be the one that we need to be focusing on to, number one, evaluate what's going on, address that issue, that circulation issue. And cholesterol, we're now learning, it actually is just a very small part of that whole picture. And yes, cholesterol is stuck in the plaque inside the blood vessels and is part of the issue, but it is just part of the issue.
Well, the doctor that I watched this video, he had a whole different take on cholesterol and about those obstructions, if you want to call it that. He even called it a healing mechanism.
Sure.
And where people call it a blockage.
Well, yeah, and so when the underlying causes, okay, what started the whole thing? That's really what we're trying to get at. Cholesterol is not necessarily the cause, based off of recent research coming in, and so but damage to the blood vessels, and we're thinking now that plaque may actually be part of the healing process, a Band-Aid, if you want to call it that.
Blew my mind.
And actually calcium actually gets stuck in the plaque. Calcium is not really the problem, but it's getting in the plaque and it shows up on the CT. And so that's how the CT heart scan, it shows that calcium. And matter of fact, a friend, business partner of mine, he went in for a CT scan. He had 5 blockages, and he was having problems. So, so he did have a quintuple bypass.
Is that just a have to? I mean, if because they make it such an emergency, they don't give you any options because you may die today.
Right. Well,
I mean, how do you deal with that?
That's right. That's a good question. So he was having major problems, but it was actually so gradual over the years that he didn't know. And so he was actually a golfer, and carried his own bag when he was younger, and then he got to the point where he wouldn't carry his bag and used a cart,
A pull cart,
and then went to the golf cart, driving the golf cart, and he had a chipping green in his backyard, and he took care of that. And matter of fact, he had a beautiful large acre piece of land with his house, and had a chipping green back there. And eventually, just gradually, he ended up having to hire, somebody to take care of that because he didn't have the stamina, but he didn't know what the problem was. But he was actually getting tired and fatigued. I saw him the late evening, after that surgery, and I said, can you feel a difference? And he said, yes. He said, I hurt. And matter of fact, he was hugging his bear because they split him open. He was hugging that bear to keep his chest together. But he said, I feel more alert now, even though he's under drugs and all these kind of things. So he could feel the difference. So, so the video I watched, there can be some compensating mechanisms where the body can actually grow new blood vessels to bypass that area, improve the circulation.
Angiogenesis.
Some angiogenesis, new blood vessel growth. I haven't evaluated everything about that video, some of the claims that doctor was making. Matter of fact, he did lose his license. So
the doctor that I sent you the video?
From what I understood, I did a little background check on him. So he's controversial, and he did lose his license. And so once again, but it makes me think, okay? And that's what I want to do today is I want to help you think. And we got to get to the source of the problem. And cholesterol is not always a problem. Matter of fact, many years ago, the first cholesterol drug that came out was called, I'm not going to say the name because I don't want to get in trouble. But anyway, that first cholesterol drug came out. I had a pharmacy, and a husband and wife came in, and they both had high cholesterol. They had a family history of heart attacks. So the doctor said, well, we're going to put you on this medicine. And they said, well, we'd rather, eat healthy and eat no cholesterol. So for 3 or 6 months, they had no cholesterol, no eggs, no red meat, nothing. They had their cholesterol tested again, and their cholesterol was higher because our body has to have cholesterol. We have to have it. It's a precursor to many different things in our body. Actually, every single hormone in our body, cholesterol, sex hormones, estrogen, testosterone, all of those, and many other chemicals. I can't even tell you, I haven't really studied that in great detail, but we have to have cholesterol. And so the cholesterol, they did end up taking that medication and ended up with some side effects, from it. And matter of fact, that drug is no longer on the market. So it's not popular, and they've gone for newer ones that seem to have fewer side effects. So, but we do need to pay attention to familial type histories. So if a person has a family history of heart attack or stroke or kidney disease, okay, we need to pay attention to that because you may have inherited some tendencies, but it's our food and our lifestyle and activities that allows that to happen. And it's not just cholesterol.
We may have got our parents' genes and genetically we're following them, but we are also raised by them.
And we had that tendency to do those things.
So we're cooking the same way. And I mean, this is how Mom used to do it.
That's right. That's that story I told about the pot roast.
Yeah.
About cutting off the end of the pot roast. Well, it's because Grandma and Meemaw did it, and they did it because it wouldn't fit in the pot.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's the reason why, but nobody else knew that. They didn't pass on the why on that. And so, yes, we have a tendency, and I was raised eating dessert every night after dinner and things like that, and my parents did not live a long life.
My family deal was chicken fried steak and gravy and mashed potatoes, and no salad, no fire, none of the
things.
good stuff. Just a gigantic plate of that, and so comfort food.
And that's what we need.
Yeah.
And so therefore, what's nice is that we have these channels, these social media channels, and the internet, so we can learn and learn from YouTube and do. I like the term critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be thinking about what we're doing and questioning. Even the video that you shared, I'm questioning that. I'm taking that information and processing that and trying to be smart.
Right. Well, I knew that you would be able to pick it apart. I didn't have the ability to, and I just thought it would be a great topic.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you took the time to look at it, and you created a handout, which is on
our
the
website.
Learning Center.
On the Learning Center at prevailovercancer.com and at hyperbaric.plus. We have this handout. It's a free handout. It's going to be there for about a week, and then it'll be changed for the next seminar. So I'm going to go through this and just kind of highlight some things. I'm going to try to concentrate on the positive things, actually things we can do to reduce these concerns. So cholesterol, heart attack hypothesis, what we've been told, that LDL cholesterol, which is the bad cholesterol, is a risk factor. The HDL is the good stuff. I've seen people with high HDL and low LDL still have heart attack. Okay, so that's not the only factor. And so lowering it through, no matter what the mean, is going to reduce that risk of a heart attack. Well, that's where I try to concentrate on the person that has a problem. So when a person comes to me, I'm going to say, okay, what's your blood pressure? Are there any organs that are being involved? Kidney numbers, are those decreasing? Okay, we've got to pay attention to circulation and figure that out. So, excuse me, but the evidence is evolving. We're learning, and the learning process is going a lot faster. Used to, it'd be at least 30 years of taking this idea that cholesterol may not be good. Now we're seeing it, evolve quicker. And so we're able to learn that information, evaluate it, and apply that faster. So the evidence is weak that cholesterol is the cause. Cholesterol is stuck in that plaque along with other things, but what damaged that plaque? Matter of fact, that plaque, excuse me, also has what's called endocalyx, and I know y'all can't see this, but hair inside the blood vessels. That hair is kind of like what we have in the lungs. It actually helps process and move the blood cells and other things along. And if this is damaged and it's slick, now that allows that damage to start occurring. So this endocalyx, and there's actually supplements geared for that, repairing that and helping the hairs to grow reduces the risk of heart attack and stroke. So, matter of fact, it's interesting. It's not a part of this, so I'm going to say it now because it's not as like a supplement on here. By the way, remember, supplements had not been approved by the federal governments to diagnose or treat diseases. But there are studies showing that people that take glucosamine have a reduced risk of heart attack and stroke and dying earlier. Glucosamine helps with, we think of cartilage for arthritis, but it helps the calyx to grow. And it helps the lining of the blood vessels to be healthier. So therefore, it comes back to we need to be eating more whole foods. Is very important. Processed foods that's overcooked, overfried, is more of a concern. So on that. But anyway, so glucosamine is one of those things I do take, both for my cartilage, and my blood vessels.
The one good thing that doctor said is if you pick up a package and it has ingredients, put it back down. he said it shouldn't have ingredients.
That's right. We need more simple foods. And matter of fact, I was talking to, and this is not just the United States. I have clients. I had a client from Bahrain yesterday, and she was talking about her mother's health, and they have the same type of concerns in other countries. So processed food is a problem. So eggs. So we've been told the eggs are bad because of the cholesterol. And if I remember correctly, that original cholesterol story came from processed eggs. And so what they were doing was they actually had soldiers that they were feeding dried, reconstituted eggs. And that's where they found out that that breakfast that they were eating, I don't know what else they had in that, with that breakfast.
Preservatives.
Well, preservatives and hash browns and toast and other things, and maybe margarine. I don't know, because they're trying to be healthier, but they found that that egg, but it was a reconstituted egg, it was a processed egg product, raised cholesterol levels. Bam, there's the problem. Okay. Well, now we're learning, once again, eggs are not as much of a problem for most of us, so we do need to be cautious. Once again, I want to stress, everybody's unique, and we have to evaluate your blood pressure. For example, that's the number one thing I'm going by. If your blood pressure is going up, if it's high or going up, there's a circulation problem. And it could be caused by actually kidney disease itself. It can actually cause kidney disease. The kidneys actually make chemicals to help lower blood pressure. There could be a narrowing in the blood vessel. There could be a lot of fibrin or fibrinogen fibers in the blood. So there's many causes of that.
One of the newest things I've heard and that I never knew, I thought the heart pumped blood throughout your body. Well, no, it pumps it through 35, 40% of your body, and then your vascular system creates think of a snake, I think is what they were saying.
Yeah, that's
think
good.
of a snake, and as that snake moves, it's moving. So think of a snake going down your leg, and it's pushing that blood to the end of your feet, to your toes, and then it has to push it back up. And if that falls apart, then that's where you get all this
Edema.
swelling and edema. And that's a big, hey, everybody says your heart's failing. It may not be your heart, maybe your vascular system that's failing, not your heart.
So the blood vessels actually are a muscle, and they can contract and relax. And so we've known that taking magnesium can help, typically can help lower, I'm not saying completely low, but lower blood pressure, but it helps relax the blood vessels. And when blood vessels relax, they do this, they open up. And so, but same thing with our bladder and our intestines. Those are also smooth muscles, the same type of muscle as inside our in the blood vessels, same type of muscle, a smooth muscle. And then we also have the calyx, that hair actually helps push stuff through, the blood through. And so we're once again, we're learning so much more. Matter of fact, this calyx thing is like less than 10 years old. About that. Once again, you didn't know about that.
I had no idea.
By your response. We didn't know about that.
I thought that was, so I hear endothelial cells, the inside of
Inside
your
of the
blood vessels,
right.
Is when you do hyperbarics. So the nitrogen load, nitric oxide, is going to make that, they call it's like lubricating the inside of a pipe. And that's what nitrogen does. So anyway, that's where I learned about that, but I never heard about what you're talking about.
So, and that's part of it. Matter of fact, it's a muscle, and it responds to nitric oxide.
Right.
And then nitric oxide actually opens up the blood vessel.
Vasodilator. When you're in the chamber and we're at depth, my arm does not look like that. I mean, all my blood vessels expand and they just pop out. And that was brought to my attention by somebody that works in the gym all the time. And he sat there looking at his arms for an hour, and I said, "What are you looking at?"
Right, yeah.
And he goes, "Paul, this is me working out in a gym for 2 or 3 hours, and I'm just sitting here."
Okay.
I mean, that's how this all came up many years ago. And so we both did a little homework, and the next day he brought in a bottle of nitric oxide.
Right.
He said, "This does the same thing as your chamber."
Right, exactly. So, matter of fact, I've done a lot of vascular studies. I had a blood pressure cuff that would actually measure the flexibility of blood vessels, blood flow through the blood vessels, and an FDA approved type of a test. And I would use nitric oxide and magnesium and sometimes the supplements, and then follow up in a month. And it's amazing the benefits we'd see, on that. So eggs, are not as much of a problem for most people, on vascular disease, as we've been told.
Well, real eggs, pasture-raised organic.
Those are the best.
Yeah,
That's right.
Pasture-raised organic.
Yeah, those are the best. They're going to be more natural, have more natural ingredients in them. And then let's see here. What actually raises LDL? Look, I'm going to briefly just kind of go into that, touch on that. But trans fats, bad fats, hydrogenated oils, cooked oils, high temperature oils. The hydrogenated means they've actually forced hydrogen into it, changes the chemical structure, and now it's thicker, gunkier. and it's many times worse than saturated fat. Okay, so matter of fact, so this is actually following up on the new inverted food pyramid, type idea. Okay, we're learning that actually animal fats are probably not as bad for us. And I'm still qualifying my statement. I know I say that. I want to be cautious about that because we're learning, and so, but for most people, it's not as much of a problem. Refined carbohydrates and sugars are the number one problem. And so, matter of fact, years ago when I first started doing this, I can't remember the date on this, but I was just finally starting to realize, okay, I need to look at calories. And so my soda pop was 150 calories that I was drinking. Dr. Pepper.
Five times a day. No.
Well, a couple times a day. I was raised like that.
Hey,
Actually, when I was young,
we're all guilty in here that we didn't know better.
When I was little, we didn't have the money to buy soda pop. We were not rich. We weren't poor, but we were not rich, and so we didn't have soda pop until I was a teenager. And so, we had soda pop once a week. When I was a child, Sunday night, that was a treat. But then it evolved to where we could have it all the time, and that is bad, especially that type of a sugar. That fructose is even worse than sucrose, and so. But I was looking at that Dr. Pepper, 150 calories, and then I was eating my Fig Newton cookie, and I thought, this is healthy, this is natural. And matter of fact, it says natural on there, and it's got figs in it. But when I looked at the calories, 2 cookies was 150 calories. And how many was I eating? 4. So those 4 Fig Newtons were just as bad, if not worse, than the soda pop I was drinking. Even though that was natural. Well, really wasn't, but that cookie on the outside and then the jelly that they had on the inside, when you looked at the ingredients, you realized that this was not a healthy option.
How can they put natural on things when it's actually an umbrella for all these chemicals?
I know.
People don't understand that. I mean, if you don't continue to talk about it, people don't.
We have to read those ingredient labels. If there's more than 2 or 3 ingredients, it's not good. And if it has more than 2 or 3, they need to be full food sources. Real food.
Yep.
Not other things that you don't know what that is.
You can't pronounce it.
You can't pronounce.
It's not an apple.
Yes. So excess processed foods are a major issue, and then saturated fats, might be an issue for some people, but we can't say that's for everybody based off of new research and the food pyramid type thing. So. Is high blood pressure, is high blood LDL always dangerous? No, it's not. And research is showing that too. So that's one reason why they changed the food pyramid, and LDL is not always a problem. But it's still part of the medical group, and the doctors are trained with this, and it takes it's going to take a decade before we see major changes. So that's going to be frustrating.
I had a conversation with a doctor that goes to my church last night, and he yelled at me for an hour.
Oh.
And he's frustrated.
About what?
The medical complex.
Oh, okay.
He's frustrated. Because he thinks outside the box, and he said, Paul, I'm handcuffed. And, it was just a crazy conversation that I literally feel sorry for what he's having to deal with.
Yes, exactly, because they're stuck.
Yep.
They are stuck in that medical practice and insurance, malpractice insurance, that forces them to do what they're doing.
Yep.
And so I have a doctor that I see, and he's stuck. He really wants to do more things in the natural area, but he can't.
Yep.
And so
same thing. That's exactly what our conversation was.
So there are some studies showing that LDL even has what we call a U-shaped curve, meaning that actually if there's not very much, that's bad for us. A moderate amount is good, and then a very high amount is also bad statistically. So it still might, but once again, I don't think it's the cause. It's getting stuck in the plaque, in the blood vessels. And by the way, I want to tell another story about a client that came to see me. So circulation can affect any part of the body. Here we're talking about brain and heart and kidneys, but I had a husband and wife came to see me because I was doing vascular studies and actually having success with people that had erectile dysfunction. And so this husband and wife came in, and he had high blood pressure, That's what he told me. I saw his list of things. He was overweight. Anyway, and so I took his blood pressure first before he even hooked him up to the machine. And I took his blood pressure. I couldn't take his blood pressure. He had irregular heartbeats. He actually, I assumed it was something like AFib, but it was actually both. Everything's all just messed up. And so I sat back and I said, well, you need to go to the emergency room. You're having an event right now, and I can't take your blood pressure. And I don't know what it is. Therefore, you need to go to the emergency room. And while you're there, since you have some erectile dysfunction, and you're going to be spending a lot of money, I had a feeling, ask them, have them do an ultrasound of your carotid artery. So he went in, sure enough, he was in AFib and PVCs. They shocked him, got that under control. So he said, well, check my carotid artery. The doctor listened and said, yeah, you've got a problem. And so then they did an ultrasound of his carotid artery. It was over 80% blocked. Both of them were 80% blocked. And so he came back in a couple of days later and said, well, you were right. Everything you said. Yes, I had a heart problem. I have carotid artery issues. I said, well, indirectly, that's part of the erectile dysfunction issue too, is circulation is affected everywhere. So you've got other narrowing of the blood vessels in many different places. So we actually did give him a product that was called nattokinase, an enzyme on an empty stomach. And he actually did that for 2 months. And then they had him come back in for the Doppler again, ultrasound of his carotid artery, and the plaque was over 50% less. So by having the right product on hand, he was able to eat away at the plaque in his carotid artery.
Isn't that why a lot of people do apple cider vinegar?
Part of it, yes.
Yeah.
And some of that acidity, normal acidity from foods actually can eat away at plaque.
Are you a fan of doing a
Yeah.
regimen? I mean, just something simple to do that's not going to hurt you?
Yeah, it definitely could be. Matter of fact, there's studies showing apple cider vinegar helps lower blood glucose too. So once again, I do frequent salads with vinegar dressing, vinegar and oil, common, simple. Simple dressings, on that. So I just want to share that story. So even if we have a problem, if we do the right things often, the circulation can get better. Our body has a tendency to heal, but we got to know what to do and how to do it, with that. By the way, if you have a question, submit that online. Ryan's going to print that off in a little bit so we can answer the questions in about 5 minutes or so. So, what actually causes heart attacks, strokes, and kidney disease? So endothelial, you're talking about the endothelial dysfunction. That means the lining of the blood vessels becomes damaged, and that allows stuff to start sticking to that area. It's kind of like a Band-Aid.
Because the hair's gone.
Hair's gone. And or homocysteine is a risk factor, we believe, for heart attacks and stroke. Homocysteine is an amino acid our body makes, and it goes high if we don't have enough of the right methylated B vitamins. And that is thought to basically kind of scratch and scar the blood vessels. Now we have a little rough area in there, so now that stuff is going to start sticking. Okay, we've killed out the good blood vessels to keep it clean, and now stuff is going to start getting sticky, and then it just starts kind of building up. And yes, calcium does get stuck in it. Calcium's not the problem, but the underlying causes, like endothelial dysfunction. Let's see here. And that Band-Aid. So part of the problem is also, and I got on the handout here about there's a special type of a macrophage or phage. Part of the immune system starts attacking that and creates the Band-Aid. Okay. Now we got this hump in there. Well, it's kind of like, anytime we have a hump in physics, something coming over, think of the ocean or a stream or whatever, something's coming over that hump. Now it's going to, actually start depositing stuff in there, on that hump or on the side of that hump. And so just with flow problems, it's going to start adding up.
You and I know where to look for the trout.
Yes, that's right. We know to look on the correct side of that rock and certain areas of that rock or limb or something like that. That's right. And then, what can happen though is if we have that plaque in there, it can dislodge and it can become a blood clot. And if a blood clot does get stuck in, now it's not just the plaque itself, but there's also clotting factors and all kinds of things involved. If that plaque does get stuck in a small blood vessel, it's going to block off that blood vessel and say this is a blood vessel and we have all these cells along this blood vessel. If it's cut off, these cells die. So it depends on what part of the body, brain, kidneys, heart, if they don't get those nutrients, those cells are going to die out. And that's why some people have little tiny damage and it's like, oh, that felt weird, in the heart, let's say the heart, or they had a transient ischemic attack. That means a temporary stroke, a small stroke. They actually had a little blood clot in some way formed, and those cells died out. And then the brain is somewhat, we call it plastic, neuroplastic, and it will help out with some of our questions. So, and our brain can transfer those abilities. So, okay. So, okay, so let's see, we got endothelial function, and plaque and cholesterol and calcium and stuff like that can get stuck in that plaque. The macrophages actually start creating more irritation in that, called a foam cell, and then we can get still a thrombosis or a blood clot from those. And so, and blood pressure is one of those things I really look at. If a person's blood pressure is going up, they have a circulation issue. We got to figure out what it is. And so I've seen many people. We have a friend right now whose blood pressure has a tendency to spike really high. They haven't figured out where her problem is. And so we're trying to encourage her and her doctors to figure that out further. Okay, so root drivers of heart attacks and strokes and things like this are going to include chronic inflammation, pain, kind of like pain, but inflammation chemicals. Matter of fact, HSCRP is actually an indicator of that inflammation inside the blood vessels. It can happen in other cells, but that's actually one of the best indicators for a female of a pending heart attack. So HSCRP goes up to around a 3. If it's above a 3, a female's at a many times higher risk of a heart attack or a stroke. That person, we got to figure out what's going on. It's not always the cholesterol, but we got to figure it out.
And are all these are part of your annual blood test?
No, it's not.
Okay.
So actually, HSCRP, although it's more common now than ever, but you just have to ask for it. And
probably pay out of pocket.
No, it'll be covered. If you have high blood pressure, that's usually good enough of a thing to cover that. Okay. On that. Same thing with homocysteine, that's another risk factor, on that. So insulin resistance and hyperglycemia, high blood sugar, that can be familial, nutritional cause, can cause high blood glucose levels, and then the foods that we eat or not as much physical activity. Like we're actually sitting down, we're not burning very many calories. After eating, I now tell my subjects, my clients, actually to do heel raises after they eat a meal, just to pump their calves, to burn more calories.
Or take a walk.
Take a walk.
Yep.
Actually, this is supposed to work better.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And something about that, and just being very deliberate for like 5-10 minutes is better than a 5 or 10 minute walk on that. Oxidative stress. Oxidation, we've talked about before, but if you don't have enough antioxidants and polyphenols from our foods, that starts damaging the blood vessel. We're talking about blood vessel damage here, okay? So high sugar, refined carbs. I like to kind of tell people that the sugar is kind of like when you sprinkle sugar on a piece of toast and put cinnamon on that and you put it in the toaster, what happens to that sugar?
Kind of burns a little bit.
It burns, it gets hard. That is what sugar does inside our blood vessels, okay?
Can be good.
That's right. It's not good. It's going to damage the blood vessels. Long-term mental stress is a problem. Cortisol levels go up. To help us deal with that, it raises our blood glucose levels. So it comes back to glucose is one of those things. Hypertension is a driver to a certain extent, but it's definitely part of this symptom too. So, matter of fact, actually kidney disease. So if the kidneys are being damaged and they're dying, now they can't make chemicals help lower your blood pressure. So now we're getting worse circulation to the kidneys, and now the kidneys die more. So we've got to do everything we can, nitric oxide type things, for example, and try to get rid of that plaque inside those blood vessels. That's the cause of most kidney disease, and sugars, whatever's damaging the blood vessels. And so gut microbiome is extremely important. And so the gut microbiome helps us to digest our food, get our nutrients, and helps with immune balance. Keeps our immune system from attacking the inside of the blood vessels. Smoking and air pollution. I've known people actually had no cholesterol problems, but they were a runner. They're running out on the highway where all the cars are, and they get a heart attack.
So you think it's fumes, huh?
They're breathing fumes and chemicals. The tire particles coming from the tires, just that grind off those tires as they're driving on the pavement. So yes, exactly.
And they're breathing high amounts of air trying to keep their oxygen levels
I think
up.
we talked about that last week about, were you on about the vent in the car kind of thing? Yeah. So, so we have to be careful about what we're breathing in. And then a sedentary lifestyle. Our body is made to be physically active, and sitting more than 4 hours a day is not good for us. And we have to be physically active and to burn off those sugars and keep those blood vessels healthy. And we have to, well, if we do exercise, it just helps take advantage of the time to maximize that time involved. And then I mentioned kidney disease, bi-directional relationship. That's what I'm talking about. Kidney disease, creates more blood vessel disease. And so we got to have that circulation going on. And then stress is an issue. Takeaways, triglycerides. If there's a test that besides the HSCRP, I look at triglycerides. If triglycerides, which is part of the lipid number, if that is above 100, that person has some blood glucose issues. So our body makes triglyceride and belly fat from excess carbohydrates, and that goes up. And so once again, triglycerides, I've actually seen people when draw their blood and it's not red. It's kind of a creamy red color. It's like milk added to it. There's so much fat in their blood.
So you're talking about visceral fat when you say belly fat?
Yeah, belly. Yeah, visceral adipose tissue, VAT, or belly fat. Not this kind of fat here, but it's more like a large belly.
Yep.
Okay.
A firm large belly.
Yeah, firm large belly.
Is a red flag.
And that comes from too many carbs.
And if you're dieting, it's really good to measure around your belly button to know, because it may not show up as a weight loss, because if you measure around your belly button and you see that circumference going down, that is a great indicator, more so than weight.
Yes, exactly. So weight, because actually if you're exercising, you gain muscle, and even though you won't see that change. Matter of fact, it's common for many years. People would exercise and that it's not working. Talked to my granddaughter last night, and she's frustrated. And I told her, I said, you need to get this Fit Index bathroom scale that measures how much water, muscle, bone, and fat. So she is blessed with muscle. She's actually was a letterman. Anyway, she had lettered as a freshman in high school and for track. She's very athletic. Now a young lady of about almost, we won't say how old she is, so she doesn't like to talk about that. She's turning a major number soon, and so she didn't want to. She realizes she's mortal now. So, but she is going to get that scale because she needs to learn that she is losing a little bit of fat, but she's also gaining the muscle at the same time.
I want to, before we move to our questions, which we're starting to run out of time. So, real quick. Doctors, even though they look at this and even though they're knowledgeable of a lot of the things you're saying, they can't respond to it.
Right.
So everybody out there is going, why didn't my doctor talk to me about this stuff? Because he can't.
Right.
So that's why it's so important to find somebody like Keith that you can send your blood labs and get another take on it.
Yes, another opinion.
Yeah, because there may be things that are going on that are known in our world that your doctor simply can't bring it up.
Yes. So now there are a group of practitioners that you can do that with. In the United States, we call them functional medicine.
Yep.
And so medical doctors.
But they're usually cash pay. You're not going to see that on your insurance.
Not on insurance, because they have to step outside the traditional area.
So as far as nutrition and the right things to be doing, that's where I look at Keith, not having to pay a functional doctor, which is pretty expensive.
Right.
But to have a relationship with you and you've got all my labs.
Right.
That's what I want. I want to know. I just need some guidance. Am I doing the right thing?
Right.
And I'm not going to get it from my doctor.
Yeah. So my granddaughter went to the doctor and told the doctor the problems, and so they wanted to give her a pill to help with weight loss. and she has other family members that have some diabetes issues, and so they're doing some other injection type things, and so she doesn't want to do that. That's why she ended up asking me, because she didn't feel like what the doctor was telling her was right, and they're not getting to the source of the problems. And so, but anyways, we're going to work with that. So, okay, so Q&A now. So we've got about 5 minutes. So, oat is a healthy food or isn't it? Could it be used by cancer patients? So actually,
And that's oats.
oats, yeah.
So we always want to talk about what are the good oats?
Oh, well, there's steel cut oats
Steel
are
cuts.
better options.
Yep.
But first of all, oats need to be organic.
Yep.
Because glyphosate is used in the harvesting of the oats, if not even on the ground before they plant the oats.
To dry
it's
it.
in the oats, and glyphosate is a risk factor for cancer and brain function, microbiome problems, all kinds of things. So number one, so steel cut oats are better, yes, but oats also don't have much protein, and so when you make that you cook the oats and make a porridge out of it, there's no protein, very little protein. Not that we have to have a whole lot, but there's none in that. And so actually, blood glucose can spike from it. So therefore, there's a couple of studies, and this person probably seen this on my posts, and I've talked about this. There's a couple of studies showing that people that eat oats are at increased risk of a couple of cancers. So once again, but it's a spike in the blood glucose, and could it be how you're fixed, how it's fixed too?
That in my book, that's breakfast, and in my book, that's pasture-raised eggs. I mean, I don't know what else you would replace that with.
Well, actually, another option is kind of like, okay, so I've got
There you go.
I got chia seeds. Think outside the box.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I've got.
I know how to get those outside the box.
Yeah, you're going to eat that in a minute here, aren't we? So, but anyway, chia seed, hemp seed. Actually,
There you go.
Take the the chia seeds, put it in some hot water, and let it sit there in boiling water. In just a couple of minutes, it's actually created a gel. You put some hemp seeds in it, and now you've got, and if you want to, you can put some quinoa, a little bit of quinoa in it if you want. Now you've got a porridge, muesli type hot breakfast, if you have to have that.
And then put some bright colored berries in there.
Berries.
On top of that?
And some olive oil or some butter, type of things. I mean, I have that recipe, I think, on my website. A recipe for the chia hemp seed porridge.
I'm going to rob your website, and I'm going to credit you with the the ones you give us, because that sounds great.
Yeah, it's a great option. I have the protein bar is a nut seed protein bar recipe on my website on the Learning Center. And then I have about 100 that are in what I call the Cancer Academy of Cancer Keto Academy.
I can't believe how good those nut bars are.
They're really good.
Did your wife make them?
Yeah.
Well, tell her thank you.
I will, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
those are awesome.
Yeah, so, and you're welcome, and I have to give them up myself. Because I eat one of these, and there's a little bite. I mean, I eat a square every afternoon, and it's got, it just tastes good.
Oh, they're
and,
awesome.
Monk fruit to sweeten it up is what we're using, monk fruit. And actually, there might be one small date in each one also.
Okay.
So a little bit of a creamy, you kind of notice a bite sometimes with that. So oats. So I'm not a big fan of oats. Okay. Even steel cut oats can still raise blood glucose. Not as bad, but organic's better, but I'm just not a fan of oats. My doctor says my cholesterol is high and wants me on medication, but I feel fine. How do I know if I actually need it?
Send your labs to Keith.
So make an appointment with me. No, but that's where we have to evaluate, do you have any circulation issues? Are there any blood tests showing concerns about organ being damaged?
Since the 1970s, if you had labs that had those numbers on there, they only had one option.
Yeah, that was the protocol, was to prescribe that.
And they can't get away from that.
But, the doctors used to look at you. And so if your blood pressure isn't high, that reduces your risk. I'm not saying you won't happen, but it reduces your risk of heart attack, strokes, and kidney disease. If your blood pressure is high, now we got to figure that out. So I'm sorry, it's not an easy answer, but you need to work with somebody to help evaluate, if it is, or look at your family history even. And so it's not an easy answer. I'm sorry about that. If cholesterol isn't the root cause, what should I really be testing or looking at to understand the risk? or my risk or our risks. And actually, once again, it's got to be circulation. And well, even okay, let's say you had a CT heart scan and you have a high calcium score. Okay, you've got a problem. Now we got to figure out why. So we always have to be figuring out why.
And then you just had a couple of solutions a minute ago that you start on that while you're trying to figure it out.
Exactly. Start on. Don't wait.
Yeah.
Because they're going to want to put a stent in, and that's what this doctor on that video was talking about. He's not a fan of that, but I've seen some people where we could see that helped. It appeared to help, and blood pressure. I've seen blood pressure go down, for a while, but then if you don't make more corrections, you're going to get another blockage somewhere else.
So whenever they do a stent, they're addressing this much of your arterial system.
Exactly, just a little tiny spot.
And what's going to happen if you don't change anything?
Up and below, there's going to be a problem.
You're going to be doing more and more stents. And people I just don't want to even start that process. I'm going to do everything I can to get in front of it. It's not an emergency. I'm not going to die this afternoon. I don't have to be in the hospital tomorrow. So what can I do to change course?
Yep. Exactly. So in this question, then a brief answer. So a family history of heart disease or kidney disease, is there anything I can do now to prevent going down the same path? That's actually why I sold my pharmacy and went into doing nutrition thing, because it's what we eat and our activity level. And so I post stories every day kind of through my day about things I'm doing, about, and it doesn't have to be, I don't go to the gym. I exercise at home and I do chores and make the chores hard, and like weed eating or mowing, so we just have to be physically active to help with that. But another component, I touched about stress. We need to meditate and relax, and we have to do that every day because of our hectic lives. And some of us have more hectic lives than others, but we've got to do that. We have to reduce that stress. Stress raises cortisol. Cortisol raises blood glucose. Glucose damages the inside of the blood vessels. So it's food, it's our lifestyle, everything we're talking about. So the person asked that question, download this guide off of my website, so you can read about that, about all of these things that we're talking about today. I'm just skimming over it.
Yeah, just pick one of them and start there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Don't do the whole thing. You'll never accomplish anything.
Start making one change,
Yep.
And evaluate what type of effect is that having. So whether it be your blood test, not your lipid panel, because that's not necessarily what we need to be addressing, but you do need to have an HSCRP. Like for you, that person that asked that question, you need a HSCRP. If you don't have any inflammation and your blood pressure is normal, you may already be doing enough things to not have a problem. Just because your family members had a heart attack or a stroke doesn't mean that you will, if you do things different.
Right.
If you do things the same, you're going to go down that same path.
We're pushed up to the hour, so we're going to have to call it a day. This is Keith with PrevailOverCancer.com, and again, a wealth of information. And for those, Keith looks over my blood work. Every time I do blood work, I give him 3 of my last ones. I want to see a trend. Am I going the right way, or am I going the wrong way? And that's a quick review. It shows you the things that are, and you can't even believe what you get in blood labs, what they call in the safe zone.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
it's crazy, especially in kidney function.
Yes.
Until you're under 60
in the United States.
Yeah, you're actually stage 3, under 60.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, now you have kidney disease.
Yeah, and
it's been going on for 20 years.
For stage 1 and stage 2, when you should have been addressing it, and maybe you would never got to stage 3, you don't know that it's an issue until you hit stage 3, and that to me is just ludicrous.
Right.
And so my doctor's not going to tell me that, but when I talk to Keith about it, he's picking it apart, and we're going to try to change the trending before I get there.
So I do want to stress, that is one of those things I look at is the EGFR, GFR, glomerular filtration rate. If that number is going down, that means the kidneys are being damaged. Why?
So just get your labs out and look at that one number over time. Make you a line chart. That's a great picture to go, uh-oh, I'm going the wrong way.
That's right.
So anyway, Keith with PrevailOverCancer.com. We're up against an hour. I'm Paul with Hyperbaric Plus here in Oklahoma City on 122nd in May. Come see us.
Yeah.
All right.
Great.
Thanks, Keith. And you're not going to be here next week. I should have mentioned that, but
that's okay.
I'll have a great fill-in.